The Dallas Stars are riding high off a big win from Friday night versus the LA Kings. In today's episode, I'll briefly recap that game, talk about some of the strengths that Dallas is starting to build, and then I'll give you an inside look at tonight's matchup versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. All of this coming up on a Monday edition of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis. It is Monday, October 25th. It is Dallas Stars game day. Big game coming up tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus, and we'll get to preview that game a little bit later in the show. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. As you can see, if you are watching the YouTube edition of the show, I'm sporting a pretty nice sunburn from being outside most of the day Saturday, but hopefully, that'll go away. Not even hopefully. I know it will. Aloe vera is my hero currently at the moment, as well as guys like Miro Heiskanen and Dennis Gurianov. But again, we'll talk about that a little later. Exciting show today. Exciting week coming up for the Dallas Stars. Lots to cover, lots to talk about this week with several games coming up throughout the week. And whether this is your first time listening or you are a recurring listener of Locked On Stars, I just want to say thank you for stopping by. Thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. I encourage you, if you are not already, to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts at, and to subscribe on YouTube as well. It is absolutely free, costs you no money at all to subscribe to the show, and it helps me out a ton to continue to crank out content for you guys. I love doing this, love covering the Dallas Stars, and love just getting to watch this team develop as the season goes on. And part of that development was on Friday night in a big win for Dallas versus the Los Angeles Kings at the home opener. The first time that there was a full house back at the American Airlines Center for a Dallas Stars game. And it was absolutely exciting. I was unable to be at the game in person, but even watching the broadcast, I could tell that the energy in the building was unmatched by anything really that's been in that building for a while, just with the pandemic and limited crowds for both the Stars and Mavericks last season. Really nice to see a full house for the Dallas Stars back and helping guide them to a huge win. The Dallas Stars are now 3-0 in overtime games this season, absolutely flipping the script on last season where it seems like they could never get a win in extra time. But so far, Dallas's only wins of the season have come past regulation, which is really exciting. Would love to see them maybe get a win or two, in the 60 minutes that you get for each game. We'll see when that happens. Maybe it'll happen tonight against Columbus, but regardless, very exciting to see Dallas get this first win. And the big takeaway from this game is that they came through on the power play. Dallas did surrender a power play goal to Los Angeles, but they scored 2 power play goals of their own. Tyler Seguin finally gets in the point column, finally, etches his name into as a guy who has scored a goal for Dallas this season on a really nice one-timer. Huge for him, absolutely massive for him to finally get his offensive game going after fighting back from an injury from last season and kind of getting his feet back under him early on this season. Really love to see Tyler finally get a goal in a huge way. Really nice shot, really nice pass setup. And then Miro Heiskanen almost, basically kind of the same play drawn up on a power play, nice passing around. He comes up big to tie the game for Dallas in the third period. He continues to have an excellent start to this season, being a huge contributor for the Stars all over the ice, which no one is surprised by, certainly not myself, as I projected him to win the Norris Trophy here in the National Hockey League, despite all the defensive talent that you see around this league. But really exciting game. Of course, the hero, Dennis Gurianov, I projected him to score the first goal of the game and to get his first goal of the season. Probably somewhere in the first, second period, but he flipped the script on that as well. Scored in overtime, the last goal of the game. Love to see that. Love to see him getting it going as well. But again, the big takeaway from this game is that Dallas is finding some efficiency on the power play. They got quite a few penalty minutes to add it up on Los Angeles. Los Angeles committed quite a few penalties, and Dallas took advantage, going 2 for 4 on the power play. So you absolutely love to see that. The next big thing to talk about from that game is Braden Holtby. I feel like we're talking about him every game that he has played because he has played fantastic, and he continued that on Friday night, saving 43 of 45 shots, earning the first star of the game, as he has a few other times this season as well. A little bit deeper of a dive on Braden Holtby so far, just to tell you how good he has been this season. He currently ranks 6th in the NHL at the time of recording this in save percentage at .950, as well as 5th in saves at 133. And a lot of guys above him in save percentages have only played 1 or 2 games. So, of course, their numbers are going to be a little better because they haven't played as long, meaning, opposing teams have not had as many opportunities to score on them. So really impressive that he has that high of save percentage through 4 games at this time of recording. Tonight will be his 5th game. It's the only other guy that has matched the amount of games yet has similar numbers in save percentages is the New York Rangers, Igor Shesterkin. I almost said Shesterkin, and that is not his name. Shesterkin, he has a .953 save percentage. Played in 4 games so far as well, having a really nice season. But Braden Holtby up there with some of the best names right now, like Cam Talbot of Minnesota, Sergei Bobrovsky of Florida, Frederick Anderson of Carolina, Jordan Bennington of St. Louis, off to a nice start this season. That's all I'm going to do to praise the St. Louis Blues in today's episode. But all those guys have more wins than Braden Holtby right now, but Braden Holtby is right there with those guys as far as stats go, and even has some better stats than some of these guys as far as save percentage and saves goes. So Braden Holtby, despite having some shaky seasons the past few years, is bouncing back in a big way this season for Dallas, and that continued on Friday. He came up really big down the stretch, especially in overtime. Los Angeles had quite a few opportunities where they maybe had a man advantage on a breakaway goal opportunity, and he came up big and made some really nice saves. So if he continues to play this way this season, the way he has so far, I don't think there's any reason why he can't at least be in the conversation for the Vezina Trophy. I'm not saying he's going to win it, not saying he's the best goalie in the league right now, but the way he's playing, I think he definitely deserves to be in that conversation early on. Still a lot of season left to go, still a lot of hockey to be played. But Braden Holtby is certainly one of the best stories so far this season in terms of, a guy bouncing back from some shaky performances over the past few seasons. Some things, obviously not a perfect game. So some things to kind of take away from this game that Dallas can fix and improve on is they did acquire 23 penalty minutes to LA, only having 10 penalty minutes against them. Thankfully, Dallas's defense is pretty good, pretty fantastic this season. Their penalty kill unit is nice so far this season. The defense stood strong, only allowing 1 goal on the power play, giving up 1 power play goal to Los Angeles. But Dallas needs to be a little more disciplined. And I know the officiating was very questionable this game. I didn't get to watch every single second. I got to tune into most of the game, not being at the arena, but was able to tune in for the most part. And I know, even talking to some of my friends and looking at social media, that the officiating was certainly not at its best in the eyes of most Stars fans and most people that spectated the game. But even despite that, teams can't control that. No team in any sport can control how the officiating is going to be. What Dallas can control is the way that they, respond to those when they are on the penalty kill and when they do have 1 less guy on the ice. But also they can, play disciplined and find ways to, not even let the referee make a decision whether it's a good or bad call, whether it's the right or wrong thing. Just playing clean, playing disciplined, and not even giving the referee an opportunity to, make a penalty call, whether, it's a questionable call or not. So just something, and obviously teams are going to have games where they rack up a lot of penalty minutes. This just kind of happened to be that first instance for Dallas, and even some penalties going longer than the average 2 minutes that you get for a minor penalty. But just something that Dallas hopefully will, and I'm sure they will, knowing Rick Bowness. Rick Bowness typically runs a pretty tight ship with his teams. So I'm sure that this game against Columbus, we will see hopefully less penalty minutes from the Dallas Stars. And Dallas was also just kind of beat in a lot of categories. They were outshot by quite a bit. They lost more faceoffs than they won, which is rare. And it wasn't by a huge difference. I think Dallas won like 46% of their faceoffs. So not too far behind from almost being at a 50-50 split with Los Angeles. But you just typically see Dallas dominate the faceoffs a lot more, and they weren't necessarily doing that this game. But I think that that's, something that they'll continue to be good at this season. Los Angeles just had a really good night in that regard. And Los Angeles also put a lot of shots on the net. But thankfully, we have Superman and Braden Holtby playing in the crease so far for Dallas this season. So yeah, not a perfect game by any mean. But really nice to see Braden Holtby have a good night, and really nice to see Dallas go 2 for 4 on the power play this game. Coming up next, we will take a quick look into the Columbus Blue Jacket organization, and I'll give you the rundown on what you need to know about their team going into tonight's game. But before we do that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to Directv for sponsoring today's episode. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching your sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way that you can get all that entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Directv Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and TV shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Jumping into the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. I want to give you a quick inside look at the Columbus Blue Jackets and kind of how they have started their season off. Columbus has had a very similar start to the Dallas Stars, especially as record goes. Both teams are entering this game at 3-2-0. And Columbus is looking to keep pace in a pretty tough and competitive Metropolitan Division with teams like the New York Rangers, who, after their loss against the Stars, have gotten off to a really hot start this season. The Carolina Hurricanes off to a great start. Pittsburgh and Washington also having really solid starts to their seasons. Columbus definitely not a team projected to win that division. I don't even know if they'll make the postseason in such a tough division. But they're looking to keep pace. They're a young, fun, talented team, kind of on the up and up, playing, in a competitive division with a lot of, the blue bloods of the NHL, a lot of the teams that historically are very good. And, especially as of recently, have had some of the best players in the entire league, with guys like Ovechkin in Washington and Crosby in Pittsburgh and so on and so on. But like I said, off to a very similar start to the Dallas Stars, winning 2 of their games in overtime, whereas Dallas has won all 3 of their wins in overtime. But Columbus has come up big in some overtime games. I would argue, and I think many others would argue, against maybe some inferior competition, but that's neither here nor there. A win is a win in the NHL. Every team has talent on their rosters. Any team can win on any given night. So impressive nonetheless for Columbus to have 2 overtime wins to start this early season. They also have, some pretty dominating and decisive wins. Their first game of the season was against the Arizona Coyotes, and they beat them 8-2. Of course, Arizona, not the best team in the league by any stretch of the imagination so far this season. But to score 8 goals on anybody in the NHL, let alone in your first game of the season, is very, very impressive. So we know that this team has the capability to explode offensively. And so that's something that Dallas will need to be on the lookout for. If Columbus is going to score goals, it cannot be in bunches, because this game showed, obviously against a team like Arizona, but still showed that they have the capability to score and to score in bunches. But they also, like I said, have some close games, some wins. Their overtime wins came against the Seattle Kraken as well as the New York Islanders. And both those teams are off to slow starts this season in their respective divisions. New York has turned it around a little bit and starting to find some wins. Seattle also still trying to get their feet under them, being an expansion organization. Not a bad team by any means, but maybe not the cream of the crop just yet in the NHL. But again, like I said, impressive that they get 2 overtime wins to start the season, because once your body starts to get tired from playing a full 60 minutes of hockey, overtime can be very difficult to carry over into. So props to Columbus, not trying to disrespect them by any means. They're a very good team, but I think that Dallas has the upper hand on them, which we will get to in the next segment. They're kind of all over the place as far as some of their games, especially as wins goes. But as far as their losses go, both their losses have kind of been blowouts. Definitely not as bad as their 8-2 win against Arizona. But they've lost games to Detroit and Carolina. They lost to Detroit 4-1, and they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes by a score of 5-1. Just kind of some inconsistency there, where they can have some offensive explosions, but they can also have nights where their offense is very flat. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a team that you know and love? Because the Dallas Stars can do that, and they choose to do that quite often. But this team does have a lot of scoring options and a lot of guys that can put the puck in the net. Guys like their captain, Boone Jenner, leading the team with 4 goals so far this season. You have guys like Oliver Bierschrad and Patrick Laine, I believe is how you actually say his last name, both with 2 goals in this young season. Jake Bean is another really nice player for the Columbus Blue Jackets, a defenseman. I feel like every game I'm talking about a young, talented defenseman on the opposition. This guy, Jake Bean, as talented as he is, coming from Carolina to Columbus this offseason via trade. Definitely a good player, definitely not on the level of a guy like Charlie McAvoy or Adam Fox or even Miro Heiskanen, but a guy that has a lot of potential at 23 years old to be a really solid contributor to this Columbus team. It'll be fun to watch him play tonight. One of the best skaters on their team. If you watch his highlights, he just moves very well on the ice. He has some playoff experience with Carolina. He scored a goal, I believe, for them in the postseason last season, because I guess it was still 2021, but last season. So he brings some playoff experience, which is really nice to have, and a young guy that they're hoping, will be, whether he's a big one or a small one, a building block for their organization as the years continue to go on. So be on the lookout for guys like that. But yeah, Columbus, their goalkeeping situation, their goalie situation is kind of an interesting one. They've given both their goalies good minutes to start the season. Elvis Merzlikins, he's 3-0. He has 3 starts this season. He's undefeated so far, off to a nice 3-0 start. While Jonas Corpusalo, excuse me, a lot of big names today, and once they all run together, my brain tends to scramble. But Corpusalo is 0-2 in his starts this season. But you may recognize Corpusalo. Do not be deceived by his 0-2 record in this young season. He was the guy back in the 2020 Edmonton bubble that notched 85 saves in one game against Tampa Bay in what I believe was 5 overtimes. Again, 85 saves in one game. You are not mishearing me. I'm sure you hockey fans out there that were watching those Edmonton bubble playoff games, I'm sure you remember that. You're probably watching it or seeing it on social media. An absolutely insane performance, one of the best playoff performances we've ever seen from a goalie in the NHL. So even if we do see him on the ice tonight, he definitely has the capability to be a lights-out goalie. But I believe that we will see Merzlikins out there on the ice tonight just because he's gotten more starts. He has the 3-0 record. He just kind of seems to be the guy for them so far in this early season. And Dallas will be looking to give him his first loss. I don't think that they've necessarily played the best competition so far this season, whereas Dallas has played some of the best teams in the league so far, at least by record and by points and by performance so far this season. But obviously, Merzlikins a good goalie. But I think Dallas, if they're able to play the way they played on Friday, can give him a good run for his money. And we will talk a little bit about some expectations for the Stars and my keys to the game for tonight's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But before we do that, I want to take another quick break and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is Built Bar, the classic. We love Built Bar. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors? There's something for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their favorite flavors. And if you don't know what flavors the Built Bar offers, here they are. They have coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, German chocolate, cookies and cream, orange, strawberry, and salted caramel. And if you haven't tried all these flavors and you feel overwhelmed by the options and variety that you have, Built Bar can totally hook you up and send you 2 of the 9 flavors in your order when you order from their website. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, but they are healthy and good for you as well. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories that range from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all healthy. You can go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. To close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, I want to take a quick moment and preview this actual game, not just talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets, but talk about how the Dallas Stars can win this game against the Columbus Blue Jackets tonight on the road. And this is a very winnable game for the Dallas Stars, if you ask me. The only thing I'm really scared of, and the only fear kind of in the back of my mind is, Dallas over the past several seasons has had a habit of playing down to their competition, especially on the road. And we even saw this in Ottawa earlier this season. Ottawa, I think a team that Dallas is better than, a team that Dallas probably should have beaten, even with their second goalkeeper in Anton Hudobin. Playing in the net, Anton Hudobin is a very capable goalie, missing John Klingberg. But despite all that, I think Dallas, on paper was the better team that night going into that game, but they lost. They played down to their opponent and just could not find ways to execute, especially on the power play, which they turned around on Friday, thankfully. So hopefully we will continue to see more of that. But Dallas, for for starters, needs to, play their game and play up to their strengths and play up to the level that we know that they can play at, which they've shown in the past 2 games against Pittsburgh and Los Angeles. Like I said, Columbus, a young, fine team, fun to watch. They have a lot of kind of some up and coming talent. Some guys that are maybe underappreciated and slept on in this league just because they play in a smaller market in Columbus. Definitely not, the biggest city that you think of when you think of the big NHL franchises, but they do definitely have talent on this roster. But I think Dallas has a better roster, top to bottom. If you ask me, should not be an easy game by any means. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park, but I think Dallas can very easily win this game if they play the way that we know that they can. And one way that they can definitely get the win is if they can capitalize on the potential return of John Klingberg. According to the digital manager for the Dallas Stars, Kyle Shohara, John Klingberg is expected to play in tonight's game. So hopefully we will see the return of number 3 to the Dallas Stars lineup, which will be huge, both just as a defenseman, but also on the power play. Power play especially being huge after last game. Columbus has had a pretty tough season as far as penalty kills go. They ranked 21st in the NHL in net PK percentage. And Dallas has a really big opportunity to capitalize on that, especially if John Klingberg is going to be back in the lineup. We saw how effective the power play unit could be with Dallas on Friday. They made some really nice passes. I know I've been talking about this young season, how I personally want to see the Dallas Stars share the puck a little bit more, both at 5-on-5 even strength, but also on the power play and look for high quality looks. And I think both Tyler Seguin and Miro Heiskanen's goals on Friday were the results of that, of good vision, good passing from the teammates, of the guys on the ice, and there was good chemistry there and good communication and just good movement, good spacing. And so if Dallas can draw some penalties from Columbus and capitalize on the power plays like they did on Friday, I think they have a great chance to win this game. And they can also find a lot of success if they can build a lead and build it early and keep their foot on the gas. In Columbus's 2 losses, they've only scored 1 goal in each of those games, but really it came down to them falling behind early by 2 or 3 goals and never being able to fully recover. They might have been down 2-0. They score a goal, but then the other team, scores 2 or 3 unanswered goals to put the game away. And so if Dallas can find a way to do that, that'll be absolutely huge. If they can win this game in regulation, no extra time needed, then I think, Coach Bowness will be happy. I think the fans will continue to be happy because they will have some pretty big games coming up at home, both on Wednesday and on Friday as well, against Vegas on Wednesday and Ottawa on Friday. I almost forgot, and I was like, oh, this is a bad look. But they're playing the Ottawa Senators on Friday in what will hopefully be a revenge game. But, of course, we will talk about that when we get there. So the keys to the game, execute on the power plays, take advantage of what has so far been a pretty weak penalty kill unit, and build a lead. Build it early and keep your foot on the gas because we've seen, the Dallas Stars grow a little bit too complacent and being comfortable. And you just can't find time to be comfortable while you're continuing to play games. Be comfortable after you get the win. Go out, play the way that you know that you can play as a team. Dominate, put a lot of shots on the net, win your faceoffs, do the little things right, and that'll lead to big success on the ice. I sound like a coach giving a weird kind of pump-up speech, but that's how I feel right now. This is a huge opportunity for Dallas to continue to fight their way to be in the top ranks of the Central Division. And at the time of recording this, they have a nice chance to do it. The Nashville Predators are up 5-1 on the Minnesota Wild at the end of the second period. So I assume that score has held out by the time you were hearing this on Monday. The Chicago Blackhawks tied 1-1. That's the only other team from the Central playing. Chicago still winless so far in this young season. But Minnesota and St. Louis are the 2 top dogs in the Central Division right now as far as points and record, and Dallas is just right there on their heels. So this is a huge opportunity, especially assuming Minnesota loses this game to Nashville, which it sounds like they did /will. A lot of weird time things going on here, but big opportunity for Dallas to grab 2 points on the road before coming back home for 2 more home games this week, where they, again, have opportunities to grab even more points to help establish, them being at the top of the division, because this division is going to continue to be crazy and insane throughout this season. Well, that's all we have for today's episode of Locked On Stars. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. With the season in full swing, I'm sure you guys that play fantasy hockey, you're scrambling around trying to set your lineups every day. You may be wondering, well, should I play this guy? Should I get this guy off waivers? You're going to have a lot of questions about your fantasy hockey team, and host Scott Cullen can help you out and answer those questions. He has a ton of fantasy hockey insight and expertise. One of the best experts in the business, and he can help you win your fantasy hockey league this season. So go give him a listen wherever you get your podcast at, for free, absolutely free. You can go find him, wherever you listen to this show, you can probably find the Locked On NHL Fantasy Hockey Podcast. So be sure to go give him a listen if you're looking to win your fantasy league this year. Be sure to subscribe to the show. Tell your friends about the show. I've loved to see the growth of this show ever since I've started hosting. It's been really fun to see you guys join along with me on the crazy ride so far that has been this Young Star season. I know it's going to continue to be crazy, and I'm absolutely here for it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for supporting the show. You can give me a follow on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also find the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. You can find us on YouTube. Just search Locked On Stars. You can find us there. You can watch all the episodes visually, and you can subscribe there as well. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. Enjoy the game tonight, and we'll be back tomorrow with a breakdown.